Hi there, and welcome to a special edition of Storytime with Mama V podcast. Now, on today's episode, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So, at the time when this episode airs, I'm actually going to be traveling. And I thought instead of a story this week, I wanted to put together what I called story buckets. So, what I mean by that is we're now well over 25 episodes into the show. And for a brand new podcast, that's kind of a big deal. That means we've had a new show, new episode every week for 6 months. So, yay us and thank you for listening in. So, if you are new to the show, first and foremost, welcome. But if you are someone who's been around for a while and have been listening to the episodes, but kind of needs a refresher on what types of episodes we have, I came up with these story buckets. So, what I'll do is I will list those in this episode, and then I will also provide links in the show notes description. And after you have a chance to listen to these, please give me some feedback and let me know if there's a story bucket in which you'd like to hear more stories, which we haven't done enough in. Also, a big shout out to my authors, and without them, this show wouldn't be possible. Now, you might notice that the volume, or I should say, the sound quality might not be the greatest in this episode. So I guess we'll call this more of like a live style episode. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into our story buckets. So the first story bucket I put together is I call it classics and fairy tales. And in this story bucket, you will find children's story classics as well as folk and fairy tales. So we've got a few episodes here. We have The Tale of Tom Kitten, The Tale of Peter Rabbit, Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast, Little Red Riding Hood, Snow White, and Cinderella. So if you are someone or your child is someone who wants to hear some old time classics or some fairy tales, have a listen to these episodes. And again, as I mentioned, I will link to each episode in the show notes description. I thought there was no point of listing off the episode numbers here because anything you need to find, I will provide a link for you. So this was in our classics and fairy tales story bucket. Our next story bucket I call fun and imagination. Now, this bucket includes Lily and the Veil Cow's Adventure, Malcolm and the Funky Monkey, and Everybody Loves Bacon. So these are fun stories. These, ignite imagination, and have a listen to those at the time when your child needs to kind of spark their imagination the most. Then I created another story bucket, and we'll call this one Believe in Yourself. So stories in this bucket are more about, you know, perseverance and believing in if you don't succeed at first, keep trying and keep going. So in here, we have Billy the Maker, we have Cornelius the Dragon Part 1, and we have Cornelius the Dragon Part 2, and we have How I Saved the Ants. Next story bucket I call True Stories. So these were books and stories based on real life events and either people or perhaps animals. Now, in this bucket, we have Milo Chow, Being Good Isn't Easy. We have Adventures of Alex and Ben, and the Beachwater Fire Department. So this was a fun one. A fireman from Florida wrote a book about his boys, and he sent me his story. Milo Chow is a story based on a real boy named, not a real boy, a real dog named Milo Chow. I also have Lucy and the Shooting Star, and this story is a memorial, I suppose, of of a loved ones who passed away, and the story sort of celebrates their life. And we also have Rita, the lost kitten. So this is a real life story about a family who discovers a lost pet in their yard and what they do about it to get the pet back to their family, to the rightful owners. Okay, next I have a bucket called Strengthening Mental Health Through Stories. So this one, so far we have two. And the first one is The Legend of the Worry Doll. And the second one is The Snail Who Lost Its Slime. So The Legend of the Worry Doll kind of gets into the details of helping somebody work through a traumatic experience. And The Snail is largely about handling or tackling, I suppose, depression and anxiety in kids. Then we have a bucket called diversity and self acceptance. And a lot of stories could cross over into this one, but the two that stick out the most are Crosby, the not so snappy crocodile, and Bertie, the very blind bat. Our next bucket, we'll call this seasons themed. So we've got an episode in here, Let's Go Goose Goose. Now, Goose Goose is also based on true life events, so it could go in a couple of story buckets, but I decided to put it in the seasons themed. There's a lot of references to Canadian fall and how leaves are changing, how the air is getting cooler. So if you're not from Canada and you would like to experience our seasonal changes through stories, give this one a listen too. There's Little Rabbit Discovers Spring. So this one is the discovery of spring through various senses. And then the next story I put in our seasons themed bucket is Granny Rattlecakes and One Half Ron. So this one is, although it's largely about Halloween, but it's also about diversity and acceptance. So some of these stories, I did put them in a story bucket, but they could cross over into various buckets at the same time. So I think I covered the existing episodes that we have. Once again, let me know if there's a bucket that sticks out the most to you of you'd like to hear more stories from this bucket, or your kids really like these stories. I know some of these stories in my own experience with my own child, she's given some feedback. For example, when we listened to The Legend of the Worry Doll, she gave an example of, if she feels scared or frightened, she has a special toy that she likes to hang on to for comfort. So kind of play around with these. Pick a bucket, perhaps. I know some listeners kind of burn through the episodes one after the other, but if you want to make theme days or theme story times, I'm hoping this will give you enough to go on. Otherwise, as I mentioned, this is more of a, I guess, not our usual episode format, so I'm not going to read a story in this episode, more of a roundup of what we already have. I also wanted to say thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support. I love reading these stories to you. Every time I read a story, it really, as an adult, it opens up another, I suppose, view for me to look at life, to look at things, and to kind of even help me with parenting. So if you are a parent or a caregiver and you're listening to these stories with your kids, listen to them with an open heart and open mind, because it always gives you another view, another perspective. Once again, a big thank you to our authors. Next week's episode, we're going back to regular programming, I suppose. We're going to get another story on the books next week. Once again, thanks so much. You can email me. I will leave my email in the show notes, and let me know which story bucket you'd like to hear more stories in. And I will see you on the next episode of Storytime with Mama V. Bye for now.